Are there other similar techniques to genetically modifying that are not technically genetically modified, so that if they ban genetically modified foods, they could say, well, okay, we have something that's not genetically modified, but in effect it's a very similar technology that we should be concerned about also?
Yes. I love this question, Steve. Thank you, because there's a lot. I mean, if you want to have a technological fix for our problems, there's no end to the disasters that are potentially available to us. Because, you know, human beings, you know, we have a limited imagination, and if we think that we are in control of nature, we've got something, we have to come to terms with that. So what we have on the horizon is synthetic biology. And does anybody know what that is? Synthetic biology is where you make up the whole organism itself. It's completely artificial. In genetic engineering, they basically, and I was listening to some of this other thing when Stephen was talking about drought resistant and some of the other characteristics they use in genetic engineering. They actually are just stealing these genes from the nature. Nature already has figured out, nature's very ingenious, it's figured out drought resistant, it even has herbicide resistance. So the genetic engineers just steal those genes from nature, engineer them and patent them, and own them and then sell them to you as drought resistant plants. So that's the fraud. Synthetic biology takes DNA and rearranges it and comes up with a whole new artificial organism. Are you familiar with synthetic biology? Do you realize there are products on the market? They have a synthetic vanilla, sorry? Sorry? Transhumanism, okay. That's another, but there are synthetic biological products on the market right now. And just as Stephen has very well described in his book and in his talks, there's no regulatory system that is monitoring, safety testing, labeling, helping you become aware of them. They're in the food system. And the other one that I want to mention is nanotechnology. The USDA has just spent something like $4 million promoting nanotechnology in the use of our food system. These are nano, micro particles. There's nanotechnology in sunscreens, but now it's showing up in your food, and they can go through your organs and through the food system. So there are so many other technologies that are out there that are being promoted as alternative ways to manipulate the food system and manipulate the environment. But the problem is not the technology, it's the lack of a regulatory system, the lack of safety testing, the lack of science that's allowing these into the market. So those are just two of some of our biggest problems.
There's some people that promote something called cisgenic instead of transgenic, where you take a gene from a species and then insert it into that species. So instead of taking a pig gene into a tomato, you take a tomato gene and put it in the tomato. So you may have more than one or whatnot. And they claim that, oh, it's not genetic engineering and people will not reject it. Well, it is genetic engineering and we should reject it because only one tiny risk is eliminated and the rest is still there.
In fact, again, it's messing around with the DNA itself. That very first genetically ingestible product of genetic engineering, which was a food supplement produced through genetically engineered bacteria, those bacteria were just given additional copies of some of their own genes and forced to produce a product that they already produce. It's just any time you force the overproduction of something within a living organism, you can mess things up and you can reap unfortunate and deleterious consequences. Anytime you actually make some kind of change that doesn't occur through nature, you can, to the DNA, it's such a sensitive system, you can create disruptions. So, as Jeffrey said, it doesn't really matter what the source of the gene is or what the expression product is, there can be disruptions. And there are also some new techniques for presumably precisely editing DNA in ways that do not are not as hit and miss as what's been going on. By the way, when they start saying, well, now we've got it more precise, I like to say, oh, well, now you're admitting that everything up to now has been sloppy. Are you prepared to take it off the market? And we'll wait for these new ones and then safety test them? You know, of course not. They want to have it both ways. But again, it's the potential for off-target effects, OTEs, is there. We know that. The experience has shown so far with these that there are off-target effects. And again, so it's whatever they want to call it. It's anytime interventions are being made in the DNA in ways that do not happen through nature, we should be very careful about it. It should be presumed unsafe, and it should have to be there should be rigorous long-term safety testing before it's ever allowed, even into field testing, let alone onto the market.
I want to close a loop to what you started. You talked about a supplement that was genetically engineered, the bacteria. That was L-tryptophan. It killed about 100 Americans and caused 5,000 to 10,000 to fall sick, some permanently disabled. And it was almost certainly the genetic engineering process that caused the epidemic in the late 80s, and that information was covered up by the FDA. It's well reported in Steve's book.
Yeah.
What questions or what question on GMOs would you like to see be asked to all presidential candidates in 2016?
I'd like to ask them, are you aware that the first systematic study, scientific study of genetically engineered foods occurred within the confines of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration by its own biotechnology task force? And are you aware that the overwhelming conclusion of the FDA's own experts was that genetically engineered foods entail unique risks? And are you aware that the FDA covered up those warnings and has been lying about the facts since then, has been violating the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act? Are you aware of that? And now that you know it, what are you prepared to do about it?
That's good. Please go.
I actually asked Secretary Vilsack a question like this, but it got long, so I'll just shorten it up and say, now that thousands of doctors are prescribing non-GMO diets to their patients and many describing very dramatic recoveries from diseases and disorders, and that animal feeding studies have shown such and such and whatnot, are you willing to guarantee to us that you're going to be requiring independent long-term feeding studies of genetically engineered foods and then giving us the opportunity to opt out of the experiment by labeling them? So it's sort of like force them into the question. It's basically an education effort. I lived in Iowa for over 30 years, and that's where Steve is, and we knew each other for that time. And Iowa's where all the candidates come to first. And so we organized, and others organized, to ask all of them Democratic candidates, I think 8 years ago, what they thought about labeling GMOs, and every one of them said yes. They're in favor of labeling, and Obama is on video saying he's in favor of labeling and safety testing. So sometimes the question and answers are irrelevant, and so sometimes you want to use the question to get into the press to educate the people at the same time, even if the politician is going to ignore it.
Yeah, that's what happens. These questions are called gotcha questions, and they're meant to, you formulate the question in order to make your point. Doesn't matter what the person says, the candidate will give you a packaged answer anyway. So you have to pick, you know, what's your favorite thing that you want to say in that moment, and it's kind of fun. Depends on the person that you're doing it. But I love the question, Steve. It was a good question. It was a good thought thing for me, and I was thinking about what I would actually like to see happen in the next election cycle, and that is I'd like to see the Farm Bill really changed to start reflecting agriculture the way, my vision for agriculture, which would be, okay, in other words, we're spending $256 billion over the last 20 years, about $14 billion a year subsidizing GMOs, instead of subsidizing conservation, subsidizing healthy food and a good food system in the USDA. I mean, the USDA is the biggest science denier we have in the federal government. So I would like to, I would phrase the question, which I'm not doing a very good job at right now, but I would try and figure out a way to tie it into the farm bill, say, could we make it a food bill? Could we make it a, could we use this money, this public money, to support healthy food and healthy farming in this country?
What would be the most powerful thing that the people watching this live, online, on live stream and on video could do to make a difference on supporting you and the growing of GMO and the supporting you and the helping you with this anti-GMO movement?
I'll go first. We're trying to raise $5 million a year for 5 years because we have a 5-year master plan to eliminate GMOs. 3 years for food, 5 years to animal feed, most countries, and we're very confident we can do it. We know what to say, who to say it to, how to say it. We've probably convinced more people in the world to avoid GMOs than any other organization. We're now on the eve or the horizon of a tipping point of consumer rejection in the United States. We tipped the natural products industry. We tipped bovine growth hormone. Europe tipped itself in 1999. And we have a very specific plan. So we would like to invite people to make a donation at responsibletechnology.org and to sign up for our newsletter at the responsibletechnology.org site. And we also have speaker training, and we have a tipping point network for people to do community action. We have a Facebook page and Twitter and all that, so you're welcome to participate in social media, spreading things out. We have a new film coming out, and so getting that in the hands of people, sharing Genetic Roulette, which has been tested as the most effective conversion tool, short-term conversion tool. Reading the long book from Steve or Claire would probably be as effective at least, but short-term conversion tool to non-GMO eating. So we have a lot of materials out there to precipitate a tipping point, and we're looking for primarily resources to accomplish it and finish our job and put ourselves out of a job.
So, Jeffrey, where do they go? They go to, what's the exact website again they go to donate?
It's responsibletechnology.org. That's the Institute for Responsible Technology, responsibletechnology.org.
How much should everyone donate to make this happen?
At least 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, you know, salary for half a year, whatever you can afford. And even $5 would help a lot. Thank you.
Although Jeffrey's plan, I know, is very well thought out and could be very effective, I also think that we won't have to wait 5 years given certain circumstances. It could be easy to get to get genetically engineered foods stopped before that. So if anybody, in fact, the single best thing is if anybody who is hearing this has actually connections to be able to get the book to Michelle or Barack Obama or Warren Buffett or Bill or Melinda Gates or Bill Clinton, and if they read it, I think that could be over very quickly because it would open their eyes and they have influence.
And which book is that, Steve?
Altered Genes, Twisted Truth.
What was that again?
Altered Genes, Twisted Truth.
Amazing book.
And that would be one way. Another thing is, I haven't mentioned it, I don't think, that I just this last week issued a formal challenge to Monsanto, which you can read on the website of the Alliance for Biointegrity, www.biointegrity.org, or the website of the book, alteredgenestwistedtruth.com, to try to refute my book, to try to present a list of every assertion of fact in the book that they can decisively prove is erroneous, just as I decisively proved that some of the statements, some of the claims in a Monsanto brochure were clearly false. And I said, look, there are two different versions of reality presented in my book and in what your brochures put out and the rest of the biotech promoters put out. Both sets of facts can't be right. They both can't describe the same world. It's time for us to discern, for the public to be able to discern what is real and what is fiction. So if you can't refute my book, we'll know. So, of course, they will try to dodge that. But if you know people in the media that can hold their feet to the fire and make it impossible for them to ignore the challenge, that would be very powerful too. Or if we could raise enough money to run an ad in the New York Times about the challenge and, again, saying that they have to respond, that could be, so that would take less money than the $5 million that Jeffrey needs. So, again, whatever you want to donate to or put your attention on, just go for it, you know. But the main thing is do something, get active in your own life, vote with your dollars when you're at the market. Stop buying food containing GMOs and start complaining to the store managers or at restaurants, I don't want to eat GMOs. I think you should take a more active stand in your store or your restaurant. So that could have a big effect as well.
I don't have an organization behind me. I'm an independent journalist, and one of the reasons I'm an independent journalist and was also, well, after I left government practice, you know, when I was in government practice, there was actually some still, it was in the Carter administration, if anybody, if you remember that, there was actually a sense of public service in the government. And when Reagan came in with all the deregulatory framework, it changed everything, and I left. And both as a lawyer and as a journalist, I've had so much misdirection, and I decided independence in both of those was the only way for me to be able to speak truth to power, to be able to say what I felt was really true. So I don't have an organization. I do what I do because I feel very strongly about the world we live in, the integrity, as I said, of the natural world, our own personal integrity, the integrity of our society. Are we going to be truthful people? Are we going to stand up for what's right? So just take whatever you can from this health conference, this good health conference. It's been full of information, and you've been encouraged to spread the word on any of these issues and support. Thank God for the organizations we have on this. I would put in a shout out for Pesticide Action Network and for Center for Food Safety and for some of the other organizations that have been actually doing a lot of the legal work of holding the government feet to the fire in these regulatory issues. But I want to, I want to go back to the kids and what we do about the future generation and how we help them find their way forward in this world, because I think how we behave is a very important example as well, and how we think, because our thinking is getting really distorted. I'm a big critic of technology. We've been sort of technologized so much, and we're forgetting how to think for ourselves, to think independently. So here's a little quick idea about biotechnology, okay? So we have biotechnology, it's a technology, right? And then we have biological, okay? Both are an approach to life. Choose biological. It's logical, it rests on the ingenuity of nature and as well as our own ability to think for ourselves. And the world we live in is actually an intimate partnership between nature and ourselves. And it's important, that's the reality that Stephen's talking about. It's important to remember the reality of the natural world and to protect it and to respect that, as well as to protect and respect each other. If we can do that, I think we're going to be okay. Thanks.
I'd like to ask you each for a short closing thought.
I just gave mine. Go ahead.
Closing thought.
Closing thought is we're going to win. Jeffrey says we're already winning, and he's right on that, and we're going to complete the job. Don't give up, because actually the other side is so weak. They really are. They appear gigantic, but just as David was able to fell Goliath with one accurate shot, they appear invincible in many ways. They're completely vulnerable, as I mentioned before. The entire edifice rests on a foundation of falsehood and fraud, and therefore it can teeter and topple very, very easily and far more rapidly than most people realize. And it's going to be quite a sight to see the way it does go down, and it will go down. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Oh, that's good.
Some years ago, I went to an Indian restaurant, India Cafe in Fairfield, and said to the owner, I don't eat GMOs, and a bunch of us don't eat GMOs. Can you take out GMOs from your restaurant? He said, come back into the kitchen and tell me what I need to do. So I saw the oil, and I saw one other thing, and he was almost completely non-GMO, and I told him what to do, and he made the changes, and I wrote it up in the local weekly paper. He put it on his door, and the foot traffic increased immediately, and within 2 days, 5 other restaurants downtown announced that they were now using non-GMO oils, and were going to be eliminating GMOs or giving non-GMO choices. And I never once mentioned to the proprietor anything about why I didn't eat GMOs. It didn't matter. When you think about spreading the word and convincing others, you don't have to think about talking points that we say. You have people that love you, that care about you, that respect you. If you say, I went to a lecture on GMOs and that's it for me, I'm done, and I encourage you to do the same. That may be all that's needed, especially these days, with so much information about GMOs in the environment, in the press. 40% of Americans say they're avoiding or reducing GMOs. Not all of them actually do, but maybe a Facebook note or a mention by you could actually get them to do what they say, or get them to say and eventually do. But it's really not difficult. So I want to, in a magic wand wave, eliminate any objection to participating in this outreach. No, you don't need to know the science. No, you don't need to know the details. No, you don't need to know. You just need to share how you feel. And if you want to know more details, we've got them. There's books, etc. But please just take this energy and multiply it 1,000-fold. Share it with your 1,000 of your most close and personal friends. And put it on your Facebook, and put it on out in your emails, and tell your friends, and watch the magic happen. Because it's needed, and it's marvelous. Safe eating.